Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here to talk to you today about the 4 R's of Hollywood. Those are remakes, reboots, revival, and ripoff. A reboot. Pretty much a reboot is like a fresh start to something that already exists, and it disregards the continuity that and recreates their characters for the most part. Now, I am not a huge fan of reboots, remakes, or any of that stuff. And for the most part, I'm not even a huge fan of revivals. However, if they was to make a Sliders revival, I'm all in for that. But the thing is, Hollywood is not original no more. All they do is take these older properties that people love, and then they milk it for as much as they can for money. Yeah. But it's a shame that Hollywood has truly gotten lazy to where they cannot come up with anything original. And many people, they don't want to see their childhood stuff get remade, rebooted, and have it be mediocre or have it be crap. People want originality and they want it really, really, really bad. However, people say they want originality, but then when somebody comes out with something totally original, totally new, like say in the movie, they don't go and watch it. And then the movie gets like a bad rating and doesn't get that many ticket sales and it flops. So yeah, we say we want originality and we say we don't want reboots and remakes, but then when something does come out that's original, nobody pays attention to it. And that's simply because people just don't know what they want. Now, for the most part, I just don't like reboots or remakes. However, there are the exceptions. There are some that are really good. But, and it's not modern day era that's causing all these reboots and remakes. Oh, no. This stuff has been going on since the 80s and stuff. And even a little further than that, because, most remakes are just adaptations of like novels and books and comic books. So this has really been going on for a very long time. But TV was so original back in things like the 60s and the 70s and maybe even like the 50s and stuff. These huge networks and like studios, they know that people are getting tired of reality TV because people have figured out that reality TV isn't real and that it's 100% scripted, and like these people personalities aren't exactly what you see on screen in real life. So they create shows like all these medical dramas or like all these like cop shows, firefighter shows, and then next thing you know, every network has something similar to that. And most people, they love those shows, but a lot of people really don't feel like watching that. And so then they think, what if I go back into like the old days? A better time in Hollywood where people used to love certain shows, certain like movies, and like what if we remake it for like a newer audience and then mainly like a younger audience, and we can probably like cash in like big time on this and like get more like subscribers and views and people watching our shows. And that's really how it all starts. It's all about that money. But the problem with these remakes and these reboots is that, okay, they want a younger audience to watch these shows. I get that. And I get they want to modernize it. I totally get that too. Like a lot of this stuff is like really old and outdated, especially with the technology. But here's the main problem is that they try way too hard to cater to a younger audience. And for the most part, younger people aren't that like goofy, silly, or gooberish. Like they like a little maturity in this stuff. Now, there are several revivals / reboots I have watched in the past that I love the older stuff, and then when it came to the newer stuff, I just couldn't get into it, like Scooby-Doo. I love all the older Scooby-Doos. The last good one, in my opinion, was a pup named Scooby-Doo. And I consider all those older Scooby-Doo shows to be canon. Now all the newer Scooby-Doo stuff that came out in like the late 90s and 2000s, I just can't get into those things. Like, I can't with all the modern day clothes, technology, um, and it's just like they say it's canon, but I don't understand how, especially with the decades passing. I mean, the older ones were clearly like in the 70s and the 80s, and now the new ones in the modern day, but they still wear the same clothes as they did back in the day, so it just doesn't make no sense. Like, Get a Clue Scooby-Doo, it wasn't really all that great in my opinion. Same thing with Tom and Jerry. I love the older Tom and Jerry stuff. I stopped watching with Tom and Jerry Kids. I consider all that Tom and Jerry stuff to be like canon. But I remember like my nephews, when they was younger little kids, they got into Tom and Jerry. And they started watching the new one. And I remember watching the new one, and I'm just watching, and I'm just like, okay, it's similar to the older one, but it feels forced. Like, all the humor feels like forced in it. And it just didn't have that same vibe, that same feel that the older one did, as I remember watching as a kid. Even now, like, I watch the older ones on DVD, and I get that same feeling I did when I was a kid. It was just good random humor. And then with the new ones, it's just like, hey, let's throw this together, let's throw that together, and ha ha ha, that's supposed to be funny, but it's not funny. His Dark Material is another one. I've never seen what was that Golden Compass movie that came out a long time ago, but I watched clips of it on YouTube. And as I'm watching it, and I remember the scenes from the TV series, I'm just like, the TV series just did it better. The acting on the TV series is a whole lot better. And it's because instead of trying to cram an entire book into one movie and other books in that same movie, the TV series, it goes book from book per season, and it has more time to tell like better stories. And that's really how things should be. I'm kind of getting tired of movies ruining things. They just need to make TV series out of stuff like Harry Potter. There needs to be a Harry Potter TV series. That way all the stuff they left out of the books from the old movies can be in this TV series. Not to mention the special effects in the TV series look way better than that in the movie. And the movie had a movie budget. The TV show has like a TV show budget, but a little bit more. And that's crazy. The TV series looks better than the actual movie. The acting is better in the TV series as well, which is weird because the movie has like all these big time movie stars in it. A Series of Unfortunate Events was a great television series on Netflix. They took everything that was wrong with the movie and improved upon it because they stuck to the books. They changed a little here, things here and there, but for the most part, it stayed solid and consistent. In the movie, they bounce around from like book to book, which confused a lot of hardcore fans. And it's like the cast was okay for the most part in the movie, but Count Olaf played by Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey was just being Jim Carrey. He wasn't really trying to like play that character. He was just doing his natural thing that people love to see him do. And like that kind of like ruins it for the most part, because when Jim Carrey takes on these iconic roles and he just does his own thing, being himself, he's not playing a role. He's just being himself because he knows that's what makes him money. But the stars in the TV series, they actually acted more like their counterparts from the book. Neil Patrick Harris, he was a perfect Count Olaf. Like, he really didn't even look like himself. He didn't really act like himself. He acted like a completely different character. And what was so cool about seeing this show, it was cool seeing like celebrities that I've seen before and other things take on this role. And the show just had a unique feel, a unique vibe to it. It had this weird quirkiness to it. Its set pieces were very unique. Like, it felt like you literally picked up a book and you saw these characters come to life, and you saw the weird, like, bizarreness of inside that book come to life as well with the background scenery. I remember watching the TV show first, And then I watched the movie, and the movie, it was okay, but it just didn't feel as cool as the TV show did. There was a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids TV series back in the 90s. It was so funny. It was just like, it was syndicated. It was a comedy. It was an hour long. In the first series, it dealt more with the shrinking machine for the most part. But then after that, they went into a different realm. They did more other stuff, more sciencey stuff. It was just a wacky science comedy. There was an episode where they would clone somebody. An episode where the family got like powers and stuff. An episode where the dad brought people back from the olden days, like caveman days and other stuff. It's like whatever you could think of, they did it on that show. And of course they had a brand new cast, but it was the same characters from the show, minus the baby. I don't know why they left him out, but they did. And it's kind of like, you know, I remember the first I Shrunk Your Honey movie. I love the first movie. The second movie, not so much. The third movie, it had its moments, but it was too silly. So this TV show was a nice way to correct those, second and third one. Now, not every TV show that gets remade from a movie turns out great. There are some that were colossal failures and only lasted for one season. Rush Hour, Bad Teacher, and Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation didn't fare so well. I watched the first episode of the Rush Hour remake, and after that I said no more. I tried to watch Bad Teacher. I could barely watch one episode. It was just so bad. And as for the Rush Hour TV series, that was just terrible. I blocked that all out of my head. I don't when I saw the trailer looked cool because they tried to mimic the TV show. But then once you get into the TV, not TV, but they tried to mimic the movie. But then once you get into the TV series, it's kind of like those elements of Rush Hour from the movie are only kind of in there. And then there's all this other cop stuff. And it just wasn't done properly. It wasn't acted properly. It just, the characters were way too young. And it's just it just was not a good TV series. And both of these came from CBS. As for Bad Teacher, they can't have a villain for their central TV show. So it's kind of like she does these dastardly things, but then she learns the error of her ways at the end of an episode. So then it's kind of like, okay, so then why is she constantly messing up in every episode? And they redeem her way too fast for her series. And it's kind of like, if they knew that you can't have a show about a villain and that's it without having the hero trying to stop that villain. So making a show out of Bad Teacher was just dumb and pointless. Now the live action Ninja Turtles show, that I watched in its entirety because I was a teenager at that time and I was big on Saban stuff. Even though Saban stuff isn't really that great, all of his stuff were one-hit wonders except for Power Rangers. That's the longest lasting series he's ever created. Now, there are a lot of YouTubers who keep saying that Next Mutation is complete trash and it's garbage and everything sucked about it, especially the female turtle they added. It's not that bad. It is bad, but there are some good moments in it. You can enjoy yourself. It's just, the problem with this series was they get rid of Shredder and the Foot Clan after, the first couple of episodes, the first 5 probably. They introduce a new central bad people, which are these dragon people. And for the most part, the dragon people aren't that bad. It's just, there's too much comedy in this series. And there are also a couple of other villains, and they're all way too comedic. April O'Neil and Casey are nowhere to be found in this series, but they do now have a new female turtle named Venus de Milo, because, the whole Renaissance painting thing. Now, the most outrageous thing in this entire series is that they made all the 4 turtles not brothers, and then none of them are related. Now they're just regular turtles, and the reason for that is because they wanted to introduce a love interest for the Venus character because she was the 5th turtle in the bowl that's been retconned now in this whole series. So that sucks, because people like the idea of the turtles being 4 brothers, not just 4 random turtles just put in the bowl with a 5th female turtle because they all want to get with her and stuff. Now the new female turtle, she is annoying, but she can be okay at times. It's just okay. The reason why this series didn't do too well is because it was too silly and way too comedic. The dialogue was terrible. The voice cast didn't always match with, how we know the turtles' voices to sound. Leonardo's voice is extremely deep. The turtles also have more of an aggressive looking vibe to them because now they're 18, but now they have all these muscles and pecs in their shields, and it just looks weird. They also have a new design, outfits they wear. I like the bandanas for the most part, not Raphael's because his is shredded, but he's supposed to be the bad boy, so they're giving a couple of more garments and stuff, which that's not bad. I don't mind that. But they all now have different weapons that are just so bizarre. Once again, Michelangelo's nunchucks have been removed because apparently they are too dangerous in other countries. And now he's giving, I forgot what he's giving. He's giving kind of clubs or something like that. I think somebody said tonfas or something like that, but I can't remember what it was. It reminds me more of police sticks from back in the day. And Venus, she has no weapons. She just has magical powers. Because this show delves more into the spiritual, mystical elements of martial arts from older movies and stuff. Splinter is in some kind of coma from some kind of Nexus realm. And the problem is this show is geared too much to little kids because it's a Saban property. And one thing about Saban is that he wants everything to be geared to kids. He wants everything to be silly. He basically tells people these shows need to look like cartoons. That's why his later Power Rangers series, and when he came back and bought the rights for the Nickelodeon era, he told them pretty much everything has to look like a cartoon. That's why they wear the same clothes in every episode now. And it really sucks because the design of the turtles wasn't that bad. They still had the costumes, but the animatronics wasn't as good or lifelike like in the movies with the heads. But for the most part, the suits looked okay. You know what I'm saying? But, Saban is known for being cheap, even though he's a billionaire and stuff. But he should just let the series be more like the cartoon series, more like the movie series. Have it, give it some edge and stuff. I mean, even some of his older Power Rangers series had some edge to it. But he ruined it by having them make it the most silliest, slapsticky type thing. He could imagine. And it's not, like I said, entirely terrible. If you can just block out all the stupid sound effect noises they make, when somebody it's kind of like the Three Stooges. They had those kind of sound effects in it, and it's just stupid. But if you can ignore that, ignore some of the acting in it, some of the plots, it can be somewhat enjoyable at times. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 2003. That was a remake from the original 1987 series. Now, the original 1980 series, I can't talk. The original 1987 series was a really good series. It was fun, it was campy, it was cheesy, it was action-packed. People loved it. That what made Ninja Turtles such a big thing back in the day. But the 2003 series, I can't believe I'm saying this, was a million times better. Well, at first it wasn't the first 4 seasons. Because they took storylines from the actual comic books. It was slightly darker. It was more mature. They still added their own new stuff in there, but then they mostly was just taken from source material. And it made it so much better to watch. But then those hardcore fans from the 80s kind of we don't like this Ninja Turtle. We want the silly one back. And so they changed the intro to make it seem more like the original one from the older series. After people complained so much, they decided to take the Turtles far into the future, which really ruined the show because they brought in more sillier storylines. It was more lighter and fluffier, but then people hated that. So then they brought them back to the original timeline, and they changed the appearance and animation. Now the appearance was a blend between the old 1980 version and the 2003 version. And the new animation style was terrible. It was disgusting looking. Like I loved the 2003 animation style. It was crisp. It was defined. There was like all these great like colors and shading and contours, and it was just like amazing to look like. It looked like turtles were like real looking, but in a 2D form. Then it got rebooted again in 2012, and that was a pretty cool series. It was done in CGI, and it was more similar to the original. It was more like a remake of the 1980 series, where it took a lot of those story plot lines and stuff, and it was really cool to see it in a more mature kind of way. Then they came out with another reboot, and that sucks. I think it's called Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or something like crap like that. It's disgusting. It's drawn stupidly. It looks stupid. It's done with that flash animation crap. It just Hannah. Hannah is a great series on Amazon. It based off of a movie that came out a couple of years back, but the movie didn't do so good. And when I looked at clips of the movie online on YouTube, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't seem as cool as a TV show. Now, the first season follows the movie pretty much in its entirety, but it changes little things here and there. The second season is a million times better, but the second season feels completely different from the first. Like in the first season, Hannah has been like avoided human contact her entire life. She doesn't know much of anything other than what this man has taught her, who pretends to be her father, but he's not really her father. He kidnapped her from a government facility where they train these little girls to be like assassins. Now, like I said, in the first season, she don't know anything. She's never been to a club, never kissed a boy, never done drugs, never done like anything, never even driven a car. But then all of a sudden, now in the second season, she knows everything. She knows how to work a computer, how to work the internet, how to hack into this and that. And it doesn't take away from the series. It's just weird because they feel like two completely different series. But the second season is just a million times way better. And yes, they are making a third one right now. Hannibal is a great TV series based off the books of Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs. Now, the movies are hit and miss. People love the first movie, and I love the first movie. I've never seen the second one, but I know people do not like the second one. And as for the third one, I remember seeing it. I remember loving it. That's what got me into this whole like Hannibal Lecter type stuff. That was the first movie I saw. And a lot of people, they liked the third movie. I think there was a prequel called Hannibal Uprising. I do remember there being a prequel Hannibal movie. And I just remember seeing the trailer, thinking to myself, this ain't gonna work out. Like this is not Hannibal. Like, you know, the dude who played him, Anthony Hopkins, dude cannot do justice to what that dude did in the movie. Like, this movie is gonna tank, and it did. But Hannibal was one of those great TV shows where it was able to like take elements from the movies, from the books, and incorporate it into the TV show while doing their own thing and having their own spin on it. And it worked out beautifully, but then it got canceled after 3 seasons. I mean, I had a feeling it would. I mean, how can you have a show about a man who eats people and kill people? And it's not on streaming, because there was like streaming wasn't really a big thing back then. But it got canceled after 3 seasons, and now CBS All Access is going to make a Clarice TV series. I can't wait for that to come out, but I am kind of curious to see what it's going to be about. I don't want it to be a prequel to her life before she met Hannibal, and I believe that's exactly what it's going to be, and I just don't want to see that. I'd rather see her interact with him, because the great thing about Hannibal is that it ended right before he was about to meet Clarice. And so it's kind of like that would have been a great, like, you know, send-off point for this new series, but, you know, oh well. Now, there are some franchises that are constantly getting remade over and over again for the test of time. The Addams Family is one of them. The Addams Family is constantly getting remade for a new audience. For the most part, I love the Addams Family. I love every other remake they've made of it. I've never seen the original series, but it is on Roku TV channel. I've never seen the original cartoon series, but I have seen the 90s cartoon series, the 90s movies, which I love the 90s movies. I watched the new Addams Family that was on, like, I think it was not Fox Kids, but like Fox Family Channel. I'd never seen Addams Family Reunions, the third movie. I tried to watch it on YouTube and it was just like garbage, so I just couldn't get into it. But the new Addams Family was a remake of the original Addams Family TV series, to the point where they even took various storylines from the original series and made it into the new series. Now, of course, the old Addams Family was black and white. I don't know what the set pieces were really supposed to look like, but in the new Addams Family, everything has a lot of color. Like, it's very, 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 very colorful. And that threw me off because I was used to the dark grimness of the first two movies. Now, as for personalities of the new Addams Family, their personalities are a little bit more upbeat, a little bit more comedic than the first two movies. Like I said, I'm not sure what the original TV series is like, but these people have more of an upbeat feel. And the reason for that is Saban. Saban made this series. He made the Addams Family Reunions movie. The Addams Family Reunion movie is supposed to be like a stepping off point for this TV series. Only one person from that movie was brought over, and that was the girl who played Wednesday Addams. I remember when they remade Party of Five with an all Latino cast, because they was diving more into like politics, what was going on with like Mexican immigration. And that was an interesting premise, because the original one, the parents died. I forget how the parents died and the kids take care of themselves. And now this new show shows the kids' parents getting deported. However, the show got canceled after one season because people just didn't care. People are tired of hearing about politics, and people are tired of reboots. I mean, some people watched the Melrose Place and now 210 reboot. I didn't, but and those lasted for a long time. But it's like, even people who watched both of those shows and the original ones, they literally said it's not as good, as the like original one. So I kind of just wish they would just make a whole new show and just call it something else. Like, that would be fine, because then people won't have to compare like the two. Now, there is a remake that I absolutely adore, and that's called Anne with an E, or simply just Anne. And it's a remake of Anne of Green Gables. Now, there's been plenty of remakes of that series. But one reason why I love it is because I don't remember the original one. I saw it, but I don't remember it. And as I'm watching this one took... It acts just like Anne of Green Gables, just like the original ones, and all these other new remakes. It tells the story exactly how it should be told, but it has a more darker feel. It has like a grayish tint filter to it, make it more dreary. They also show like it's also a little darker at times, not completely, but just like a little. Like, they show when Anne was in the orphanage, how she was traumatized by all the other girls. They would make fun of her, pull her hair, put rats in front of her face. Like, she had a really crappy time there. And so when she later went to go live with the other family, she was thrilled like to live with them. And then when they rejected her at first, she was completely heartbroken, and she knew she did not want to have to go back to that orphanage and stuff. And a lot of people was upset, saying like, oh, this is too dark, this is not my Anne of Green Gables. And it's kind of like, I don't know what it's like to live in an orphanage. I really don't. But it's kind of like, it can't always be fun and games there, especially back in the olden days, you know what I'm saying, when everything was really bad back in the old days. So it's kind of like, I appreciate them showing this more darker tone, her time in the orphanage, because it was kind of like, it really traumatized her. And so then when she went to Green Gables, or Avalon, where did she go to? I forgot. I'm just gonna call it Green Gables anyway, because Anne of Green Gables, why not? So anyway, so it's kind of like when the kids started picking on her and Green Gables and all these adults, it's kind of like, that really messed with her, because it made her remember like her bad times that she used to have at the orphanage. And it's kind of like that helped set the mood and like the emotion and drama that comes with it. And a lot of people did not like that. A lot of people also didn't like in the second season when they introduced a black character named Sebastian. and this one gay character, or two gay characters, I forget their names. Actually, there was three, and people didn't like that. Excuse me. And so it's like, it's kind of like people are like, well, this didn't happen in the original Green Gables, na 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 na, and it's kind of like, you know, because it's a remake. They're telling stories that were similar to the original in the book, but they don't want to go completely similar. They want to like make it a little different, you know. And then more importantly, they wanted to show what real life was like back in those old Canadian days. Like back in the old Canadian days, and even till this day, they didn't like black people. It was all the European settlers came into the land from the indigenous people, and then they brought in the black slaves and stuff like that. And then, you know, after they got freed and stuff, it's like they still treated black people like crap. And in the third season, they introduced not Native Americans, but indigenous people, because they're not from America, but indigenous people. And okay, I never knew this, right? I never knew Canadian people treated indigenous people like crap, like the same way American people did. I had no idea. And they also brought up these little camps. They used to like, they were basically like this when they tried to Americanize, because it's Canadian. When they tried to like, I guess like turn them more into like them, they would rip these children from their homes, put them in these schools, and they would be there for the whole year, and they would not allow these kids to go back home to be so they try to brainwash these kids to be more like them and everything. And so the parents would be outraged, and the parents would like camp outside the school, and they would like make the parents go away by putting guns in their faces and all kinds of stuff. I never knew this happened like in real life. The old Green Gables, Anne of Green Gables, never like explained that. So I'm really glad this series like explained that and stuff. And so I looked it up online, and this stuff actually truly happened and stuff. I was like very, very, very shocked to find this out, because you don't hear about that over here in the States, like things that happen in Canada. Every time people always bring up Canada on TV, they always say, oh, you know, it's perfect and oh, this and that. No, they just like everybody else and stuff. There's still racism going on in Canada today between whites and blacks. And it's like, so it was kind of refreshing to see that in the second season when they introduced Sebastian and stuff. And so a lot of people was upset because, you know, the older series never showed that, because you know how older stuff is back in the day. They always try to paint one specific type of person in a good light, and so they don't want to show like the bad stuff that happens. And so I get why people was upset with this reboot, because it wasn't exactly what they wanted, but like, you know, in my opinion, it was for the best. And I remember they made another remake on PBS, and it was like the typical Anne of Green Gables, where everything's light and fluffy, and you know, and it's like white people were portrayed in like the best light possible, and it's like I prefer the one on Netflix because I want to see like a more realized take on what life was like back in those old days and in Canada and stuff. And I'll take like Anne of Green Gables, or Anne with the E, over like any of the original one, or like any of the newer ones, like any time of the day. Because the thing about the PBS one was kind of like more silly and a little bit more like goofy and a little bit more comedic, but it also felt more like the original one and stuff. And I get why people love the original one. I don't remember it, but whenever I look at pictures and videos of it, it looks so wholesome and stuff, and those are fond memories from people. But it's kind of like, not all reboots and remakes are bad. Like now with the new Carmen Sandiego show, I only watched probably like the first 2 episodes, and then I just turned it off because I couldn't really get into it. See, my thing with that is like, okay, Carmen Sandiego first started off as a bunch of like video games for the computer. Then PBS made a game show out of it, where a bunch of kids got to go on there and like compete for like prizes and stuff. Now it's old school like game show stuff. You can find it on YouTube. Like it's very, very, very old school 90s, 80s feel vibe to it. You know, back when like game shows were like more fun and weren't like celebrity related. Now with every new game show you see. Then Carmen Sandiego got reimagined in the 90s with a show that lasted for 5 seasons. Now I loved this cartoon series to death. It did have a bit of a wacky, silly 90s feel to it, which I didn't really appreciate. Kind of like with the chief being a giant, like holographic head, but you know, whatever, you roll with it. He was like the silliest character on the show. And I wish they kind of would have toned down his silliness, but like whatever. But like with this show, it was really interesting. They created these two new characters named Ivy and Zach, their brother and sister. And they established that Carmen used to work for Acme a long time ago before she went for Val. And, you know, instead of making her just a straight up villain like she always been, her backstory was kind of like cool. And also not only that, but she had like a code where, you know, she doesn't kill. She only steals for like, not for profit, but more like, you know, something she wants to keep in her own collection. So they gave her like a villainous, like, you know, typical thing, but with like a real like cause and a real sensibility and morality to it. And I really like that. And I love the voice cast for it. The most important thing about this show I love to death is that I actually learned stuff. Like I learned more on this cartoon show than I ever did in school. And it was just one of the most like, just like really cool things to see. Like, you know, it's like I'm watching this for entertainment values, but I'm also learning at the same time. So that's kind of cool. Because, you know, kids don't want to learn nothing, but it's cool when you trick a kid into learning something. Now, this revival slash reboot, it takes those two characters from the other Carmen show, like Zach and Ivy, and they kind of reimagine them a little bit. They're drawn different in design. Carmen has more of a backstory. She's more of an anti-hero in this thing. She's trying to stop Val. So it's taking elements from that old cartoon series and just reworking it. It's more like a spy type thriller. The reason why I really don't like it is because I don't like Flash animation. I think it's the cheapest crap you can go buy. Now, I do plan on trying to rewatch this series because I want to see why everybody likes it so much. But one of my main problems is I didn't learn nothing when I watched those first like 2 or 3 episodes. It's like that was the whole point of Carmen Sandiego, even the video game, is that you're supposed to learn stuff. And I never learned a single thing watching this series. And then not only that, but they try to teach people stuff like once in a blue moon on this show, and they taught people wrong. Like with the origami stuff. Or origami, I meant to say. Like, you know, it didn't originate from the country that they said it was from, and it actually originated from another country. So it's kind of like, why are you giving misinformation? You know, this is like, it's just like, it just didn't vibe with me. I get this is just for like a different audience, and I can vibe with it well because it's a spy thriller. But it just, if you're not learning nothing from this TV series, in my opinion, then I have no reason to really want to watch it. But now I'm kind of curious because of that spy angle. So one day in the future, I do plan on rewatching it. It's just, I truly have no interest in this show. Charm, the Charm reboot. I don't particularly like the Charm reboot. I think it's pretty mediocre. It's not entirely bad, but it's not entirely good either. The original series was a whole lot better in my opinion until the original series lost Prue. The moment they lost Prue and brought in Rose, the show was okay for the 4th season, but by the 5th season the show started to suck, and then the show really sucked towards the end and in the 8th season. But for the most part, the show was pretty solid. It's about a group of women, 3 of them that are sisters, and they all reunite and they find out they are the magical witches known as the Charm ones. They're pretty much the superheroes of the show that kill all these demons because demons want to take over the world. When Prue dies, then they bring in Rose character, and then she becomes the 3rd Charm member because they have to be the power of 3. It can't be the power of 2 or the power of 4. It all had to be the power of 3. So now the Charm reboot, they scallywagged on the original actresses that was in the original Charm. The original Charm actresses, they kept trying to get this show rebooted or revived, I should say, for the longest time with them in it. And then something happened behind the scenes where I think the CW was going to do that, but then they scallywagged on them and decided to go on a complete reboot. So now with this reboot, they reimagined the show. Now, the 3 Charm ones are the 3 Hispanic women, and it's basically the same stuff that happens in the original series. But here's the thing. Only one of these sisters on the show is really Hispanic, because only one of the actresses is really Hispanic. See, they market this as like an all Hispanic series because after Trump declared he was going to announce himself as the presidency back in 2015, he went on this huge rant towards Mexican people. So, you know, like most shows do, they wanted to capitalize on what's going on in the world and politics and stuff. That makes sense because, you know, lots of shows do that. So they were going to have an all Latino cast, but they only hired one Latino woman. The other two women on the show, they're half black and half other stuff. I think one's half black, half white, one's half black and indigenous. And so, and they got cast that way because they have an exotic look. Pretty much in Hollywood, it's like this. If you look otherworldly, you can get cast as anything. Italian, Hispanic, Armenian, like whatever. It's been done before. Gal Gadot is from Israel, and she plays a Greek warrior lady, you know, and she doesn't look Italian, does she? Nope. Serena Vincent from Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, she was told in auditions, when she was auditioning for Power Rangers, her first gig, she has a very ethnic look, and she can be cast as any kind of thing. And it's kind of like, you know, so that's what Hollywood likes to do. You know, Hollywood needs to stop that. And so when people watching this show found out the ethnicities of these actresses, they was furious. So then that caused the writers to change things up. Now, instead of being fully Latino, now two of the sisters are half black and half Latino. However, two of the actresses have no Latino whatsoever in them. So they should have just cast Hispanic actresses. And for the most part, I was on board with this reboot. Like, I really didn't mind too much. I'm just like, okay, whatever. I'm just going to see what it is for what it is. And it would be kind of cool to see what, like, Hispanic witchcraft type stuff would be like. You know, because I don't know anything about that. But then when the series started, you don't learn nothing about Mexican, like, witchcraft. You still learn European witchcraft and all this stuff. I don't know if it's changed since the first season, but that's how it was. And as I started watching the pilot episode, I realized something. This thing has a different feel and vibe to it. Like, it has more modern stuff to it. Their magic is now shown to be colorful and sparkly and mystical looking stuff, and it's very colorful. And that's nothing, and that's how the original one never was. It never was like that. You know, you saw their powers, you didn't see like CGI sparkles and this and that and smoke and stuff. And so that kind of, I get why they did that, to be different from the other series, but at that same time, it's kind of like it takes away from what it used to be, because it used to be more grounded in the original one. Another thing that they strived on is making the show very like feministly. So it's kind of like it has a very strong feminine vibe to it. The old one had that, but it never like said it. This one actually says it a lot. And in the pilot episode, you constantly hear the phrase strong woman over and over and over and over again. Now, in the past, I really didn't care about hearing about this because I knew exactly why they was doing it. And it's because they were trying to teach young females to be like empowered and strong. So I totally got that, and I was totally cool with that. It's also to help older women who might be like, you know, who get put down a lot and don't have no confidence and stuff. So I get why they did that. But then they kind of overdid it with the first episode in this show, when they kept saying it over like 15 times. And the demon in the pilot episode, it's even stated that he only goes after strong women. And it's just kind of like, you don't have to like cram it down my throat. You know what I'm saying? Like, just let it happen. I don't have to see it and stuff. And so I watched the first season, and the first season was pretty okay. I saw like similarities from the original one, but they kind of bopped around with it. It's like stuff that happened in the third and fourth season, they incorporated in the first season in this show. So it was kind of like a mix of everything and them doing their own thing. But no matter how much they kept blending stuff around, it never really felt like the original series. And so like, this show has more of a technological vibe to it, whereas like they have these magic headquarters that's like electronic based with like computers and stuff like that, and it's just kind of like, that's weird. And so then next thing you know, they lose their powers, and then they have to use like these weapons, and it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of cool. The original ones never did that, and I always wanted the original ones to fight a lot more, but they never did. But then it kind of like goes nowhere because in the next season they take all these magical things away and give them some of their powers back. And then it turns out like they combined two of the sisters from the original one and meshed it all in the older sister. They took Prue and Paige and mashed them together and made I think her name is Madison. I think her name is Maddie or Macy. That's it, Macy. And they crammed that all into her. So now instead of being a half white lighter, she's kind of like a half witch, half white lighter, kind of half like demon type person. And so that's really interesting and neat. And it was cool to see her like, you know, go around like the dark side towards the end. And that made good for good telling. It was a nice retelling of this story. And so that's kind of what they should have done in the beginning. And it's kind of hard to like judge because it's kind of like with reboots, do you want it to be exactly like the original one? Or do you want it to be exactly like the original one with sprinkles of like originality? Or do you want the reboot to be completely original? And so it's kind of hard because, you know, everybody wants a little bit of something different. And this show does kind of do that. But then this show also messes up by getting rid of its main villain in the first season. And then they do the whole like Cole Phoebe storyline with the new characters in this one. But it's done so much like poorly and badly because it's just not written very well. It's not written to like keep me want to be like engaged and like, you know, want to feel for these characters and stuff. But then I stopped watching halfway in the second season because the actress Sarah Jeffrey, like they just like it just she did something online with the original cast that pissed me off on Twitter to the point where it's just kind of like I just don't want to like have to deal with looking at her no more. Because what happened was, okay, you know how the original cast members of this show, they kind of like shade the new one a lot. They've been doing that like for the longest time, especially Holly Marie Combs. And I get why they do that. You gotta remember, this was like 4 years, like 4 years for Rose and 8 for the other two of their lives. That's like half of like that's nearly like a decade, you know. And so it's like they put their hearts, love, and soul into this show, and you know, and for the CW to do that to them is totally like screwed up. And so it's like I get why they shade this show, but they never shade the stars of that show. They always shade like the production and stuff. Well, one day Holly and Rose were like hanging out doing like a live chat, and somebody asked them about the show, and Rose was being Rose McGowan like always, and she messed everything up to where it pissed off the new cast and everything. But the new cast also decided to take it out on Holly and everything because Holly was in it. Holly didn't even notice at first until she found out, and when she found out, she was pissed off on Twitter. So there was about like a feud going on between both of them for like a whole week. But the thing that pissed me off about Sarah is that Sarah said that these women are always shading. Well, she pretty much insulted the crap out of them, like, you know, and stuff like that. And she basically just said like they don't support this show, so therefore they don't support women of color. And okay, what does that have to do with anything? What does race have to do with anything? The original cast has never said anything about race. They have never said anything about the stars on that show. Like, you can hate a TV show, but that don't mean you hate this show because of the people's race and stuff. And so I was just like so offended being a black man myself. And it's just like, why would she bring up something so stupid like that? And then the woman who plays Macy, she threw some shade by saying, you know, when she hears the word charm, she don't think about the original series. She just thinks about her show. No, you can't. Okay. When you hear the word charm, you think of pretty much both of them. You really think about the original one. So for her to say that, that's just like messed up. But she wanted to be like sassy and throw a little shade, and it's just like it was childish and like immature. And so it's just kind of like I was on the fence with this show. I thought it was like, you know, all right and not really all that great, but then it's kind of like their personality and their vibe are just like annoying, and they got on my nerve. And then what made it worse is that Sarah brought up Shannon Doherty when Shannon had nothing to do with this whatsoever, because Shannon has pretty much kept her mouth shut and stuff. And then like, but Shannon has been on the set and she gave her support for the new cast, and she brought that up. And I just thought that was kind of like messed up that she would bring that up, especially to Holly, because her and Shannon are like best friends. So it's like she's trying to start some mess when there's no mess that should be like started. She wants to be mad at somebody, be mad at Rose for saying the show's stupid and it sucks, because that's what really started that whole like argument and stuff. I've never seen the original Psycho or any of the Psychos, but I know that like Bates Motel is a phenomenal TV series. Then in some reboots, they don't even get like on air because they was like so bad. Like there was a Mr. Ed reboot for the 90s with Sherman Hemsley, and it never got aired on TV, but I actually got to see it on YouTube, because there are a couple of unaired pilots on YouTube, and it was just a terrible show. Like it just didn't fit. His voice didn't fit for Mr. Ed. The comedy was like all off. It was like a family comedy series, and it just didn't feel right. Now there's a new remake that I just found out about, and I am so infuriated because my childhood has been truly ruined with this thing. And it's Ghost Rider. I had no idea Apple TV made a Ghost Rider TV series in 2019. Now it has been renewed for a second season. And this show is extremely geared to little kids. Now, for those who don't know, Ghost Rider was a PBS show back in the 90s. And it lasted for a couple of years. And it had a lot of episodes to it for the most part. But their episodes breaking down in like 5 episodes or so. Or like 2. So episodes get broken up in like 2 episodes, sometimes 3. And these kids were like junior detectives. Basically, it was like this. Jamal is in his attic, and there's a ghost that like, I think, gets on his computer. It comes from like his book and goes on his computer. Now, this ghost has no name. This ghost cannot remember who he used to be. All he remembers that he's a man, and that's it. And so, when he only talks to like certain kids, not all kids, but only a certain group. Only they can see him. He is unable to see, and he can only see through words. So that's how he communicates with everybody. Now he knows where all the kids be at because he can feel their heartbeats and stuff like that. And so like it's a really weird kind of 90s premise type show, but it's like really cool. So anyway, there's always a crime going on in this city. Somebody burning a building down, a gang stealing people's money, this computer hacker hacking all these computer systems and stealing information, like all kind of stuff, you know. So it's kind of like, so when these kids discover Ghost Rider, they decided, you know, they're gonna solve these clues. And the reason why they're gonna solve these clues because these crimes always have to concern them. One of the members named Gabby, she has her money stolen from that one gang, and that's the theatrical pilot. And the unaired pilot that later did get aired is Jamal. He's accused of burning down this man's shop, so they trying to like, you know, state his innocence and stuff. And so pretty much it's a really good detective show. Like they do like clue sleuthing. They find one clue that leads them to another location, and so on, like a real good detective show should do. Not like the Hardy Boys. Ugh. Anyway, so when they meet this ghost, you know, they all freak out. But then they learn to like accept him for who he is, and he meets them individually and stuff. So then they all come together as a group. And it's about, let's see how many members there are in a group. Those two, her. There's about 5 members to a group, and then they later add a 6th dude named Rob. And they all just like get along for the most part, and they just like really gel well, and they solve mysteries around the city, and the cops always wondering like, hey, how are you always doing that? Anyways, one thing they also try to solve is who Ghost Rider is, so they ask him a bunch of questions. But then this later gets dropped. It's later revealed that he says he has to protect the children. He don't know why, but he has to protect the children. And that he's just running. Like, that's all he remembers about his past life. He remembers running, constantly being chased by dogs, and having to protect little kids. The creator of that show revealed that he always intended for Ghost Rider to be a runaway slave from back in the old days. The dogs were chasing him. He later gets away from them. He finds a group of kids. He teaches them how to read, or they teach him how to read. I can't remember which one. And he always has to protect them, and then he ends up dying. And so that's why Jamal was the first one to see him, because Jamal was black, and he was in Jamal's book. I don't know what kind of book it was. And it was also supposed to be reported that He's supposed to be related to Jamal. That's a really interesting concept and everything. But it never gets revealed in the show because the show later on gets canceled. And then it got rebooted for a CBS show where Ghost Rider moves to Canada for some reason. And that show only lasted for a season and it sucked. But then on the way, you know, they meet like other like people in their group. There's also time travel type stuff. There's a crime going on in London. One of the Ghost Rider teammates in London, so they try to solve that while the other one's in America. And when they call him GW by his nickname, they decide to do that because it's just a short abbreviation of Ghost Rider when they have to like type to their friends when they call a rally, because they could be anywhere in the city and they can like, because this is before like cell phones, so they can like get in touch with each other by doing like the word like Rally J. That means rally at Jamal's place. And so Ghost Rider will find the other kids and send it to them so they can go to Jamal's place. Whenever they have to send like an encoded message, they will like, you know, just say GW for like really, really short. And these kids use all kind of tricks of the trade. Like they use codes to solve these clues and like decryption like type stuff. And it's like really cool. Like, you know what I'm saying? And then that brings me to the reboot. The reboot is so weird and bizarre. Ghost Rider appearance changes. It's more CGI looking, so I'm okay with that. But he just looks like a blob of like flames. So that's kind of weird. Because Ghost Rider has a unique look to him. And so he's still, this is the thing about the new Ghost Rider. This Ghost Rider now has the ability to see. And he has the ability to make things move. And he also has the ability to bring characters from a book to life. While they're running around town. That makes no sense. That is not Ghost Rider. They should have just made a completely new show and named it that. The reason why they didn't is because they want older fans to watch this show, buy Apple Plus, and watch their show. And they want to bring in new kids for this show. That's why this show is very gooberish. The kids in this show are a lot younger. They talk a lot younger. Instead of coming together individually, they come together as a group because Ghost Rider kind of brings them together by making events happen. There's this one kid who's like really shy and eats by himself by his locker at lunch. And so when the cool kid's running by, Ghost Rider makes him trip. He hurts his arm. The new kid helps him out, and later on they become kind of friends when Ghost Rider is talking to all of them. As soon as they're all together and they see Ghost Rider, and they decide to give him the name Ghost Rider because he's a ghost that writes, same name with the other one, they call him GW really fast because, oh, it's short and we can just call him that. This happens much later in the original series, and for a good reason. For this one, it just happens because the girls are like, oh, let's just call him GW. And it's kind of like, if you're going to call him GW, give it like a good reason like the original series do. Just don't do it just because the original series did it. And it happens within seconds of you meeting him. Ugh. And not only that, but in this series, these kids, like, discover things out really fast. Like, they're extremely smart. And it's like, the original kids, they were smart too. But it took them like the entire 2 episodes to figure things out, and they paced it out because it's a clue type episode. It's a clue type show. You have to use these clues to find out the next solution and stuff, and so that what made it more interesting. And just like figuring things out within seconds is not fun. And the whole aspect of like characters from a book coming to life, that's cool, but that's not what Ghost Rider is about. So they totally changed the entire premise of like what Ghost Rider is supposed to be. I've only watched the first episode. I might watch the second one to see like, are they actually going to solve like mysteries around town and stuff. But it's kind of like, I have a feeling this is just going to be another childish, gooberish type show. And I just, you know, and it's just like, I get why kids will like that, but it's like, why are you cashing in on something I love? I hate that. Sabrina was a show I loved in like the 90s. Sabrina Teenage Witch. It was just a great comedy until it moved to WB and got way too serious. But yeah, it was based off the Sabrina comic books from Archie Comics. That Sabrina had white hair. Her aunts made her by mistake with a spell gone bad, and so they decided to adopt her as their aunt. Now for the as their niece. Now for the Melissa show, they changed all this around. It turns out her dad was a warlock. He fell in love with a mortal. Sabrina got born that way. He was forced to separate from his wife and and I think he had to live in the witch's realm or something like that. And then her aunts are her actual real aunts, and this Sabrina has blonde hair, and that's how it also was for the remake of the cartoon series. And then for the Netflix show, they decided to go in a more darker route. Now, people are saying they're trying to just copy Riverdale. That's not necessarily true. The Melissa show is based off a comic book, and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is based off the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina comic book, which is a lot more darker. It's well, they worship Satan and stuff like that. So that's what this show is based off of. I knew that going in. I didn't care. Like I wanted to really see a darker version of Sabrina. The only problem is this show never feels dark. They kind of like, they have dark stuff and evil stuff going in there, but it's not really what I thought it was going to be like. It's not like Ash versus Evil Dead. It's more like a Riverdale's version of dark and grittiness. And that's because it was created by the same people. My problem is the writing is very inconsistent. The plot lines, like they'll create a plot for a certain character, and then that will get dropped until like 3 or 4 episodes later, then it'll get brought up again. And it's kind of like, how am I supposed to remember what's going on with this character if you drop their plot line for the next couple of episodes? Sometimes their plot line gets dropped into the next season, and it's just kind of like, huh? And it's like, now they did make some changes from the comic book to make Sabrina friends to become more like into the witchcraft type stuff in her circle. I'll get more into detail about that when I talk about this show, but basically it's just like, the reasons why, like I said, I don't like this reboot is because it's not dark enough. And if you're gonna be dark, you need to go there. You also need to be consistent. The pacing needs to be there, and the pacing is all over the place. Characters' personalities are constantly changing throughout this show, and the shows don't even have that many episodes. There are plot holes galore in this show. There are way too many to even name. I've named a few of them in one of my past videos, but there are like tons more that I didn't even mention. And it's kind of like romances in this show just happen out of like the blue, and it's kind of like, it would be nice if you just explain more stuff. And that's my main problem with this show. It doesn't really explain the things it needs to explain. I wish the pacing was a whole lot better. Like with the twins from Father Blackwood, they get introduced towards the end of the first season. They nearly completely disappear throughout the entire second season, only to be brought up again to do absolutely nothing. And it's kind of like, and in the end of the third season, who freed Sabrina, the original Sabrina, for her to go back in time and free the past Sabrina? That's never been explained. And it's kind of like, and then when the two Sabrinas are, like in the same universe world type thing, it's kind of like, okay, well, how come when the past Sabrina changes history for herself, how come the new Sabrina isn't affected? And it should be, because when they went back in time to change stuff, that's how that time travel thing works. And it's just kind of like, it just never makes no sense. And it's kind of like, it's written with that very stupid Riverdale type like dialogue. It has that weird like filter tint to it that's supposed to make it feel dreary and stuff like that, and it does, but it always makes you just feel depressed when you're watching it, because it's always in that dreary like muted like filter and stuff. It's never explained why Madam Satan kept that one lady's face and appearance when we know what she really is supposed to look like. It's just so the actress can play like 2 roles, and then for the actual teacher lady, it's kind of like a lot of stuff is very inconsistent with her and why she acts the way she does. And it's just kind of like, and then not only that, but if it's like, this should probably be a dark show, why is there so much like whimsy and humor and stuff in it? And I just never understood that, and it started getting more and more humorous towards the end of the series. And then they brought in all this singing since the second season, and it's kind of like, why are they constantly singing all of a sudden now? In the third season and the fourth season, that's literally all they do. And then not only that, but in the first season for the most part is pretty solid. Like, I kind of like that a little bit more than the other ones. But then it's kind of like, well, what happened to that Wicca group that they formed in the first season? That gets completely abandoned. And then, like, other storylines get completely abandoned. And it's just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, you the dude who created the comic book, and you can't even create a good show. And now this same guy, who also works on Riverdale, is supposed to make... But, you know, like, there are always going to be reboots. There's always been so many reboots in the past. I mean, you know, there's so many X-Men cartoon series. There's so many Batman cartoon series. There's so many Ninja Turtle cartoon series. And those, like, pretty much all of them are all great. But, you know, there's always that one that's not so great. And then it's kind of like, you know, you're always going to have a show that's been based off a movie. Like when they did Casper. And there's been tons of different Casper franchises. Peter Pan and the Pirates was, like, really good. They did a Beetlejuice cartoon, a Back to the Future cartoon. So there's always going to be stuff that's based off of movies. There's always going to be remakes. There's Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12. You know, there's supposed to be like a female version. But it's like, if they can't make a good adaptation, if they're just doing it for money, then they need to stop. Because they're ruining people's memories of in childhood of like this stuff that they're very fond of. And it's kind of like, money is not everything. If you want to make money off a TV show, then just make a brand new TV show. Period. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.